Welcome to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Hannah O'Brien, both a veteran spouse and the program manager for the Veteran Spouse Network. On each episode of our show, I will host different guests to learn more about the stories, unmet needs, and resources available to our military and veteran families. We're the show that's making space for your stories, so that here you know you're never alone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this month's episode of the Veteran Spouse Network podcast. In addition to doing this podcast and running peer support groups at the Veteran Spouse Network, we also offer educational seminars through our Empower Ed program. And last year, we offered a talk on moral injury, and we're absolutely blown away by the interest in this topic. We had over 100 people register for the event, and people were so hungry for the topic that after the session, they requested a processing group led by peers. We obliged, and now we actually always offer a peer-led processing session following our Empower Eds. Anyway, all of this to say, it was exciting to see how many people wanted to learn about moral injury. So the theory behind moral injury is not new, but the term was not coined until the 1990s by VA psychologist Jonathan Shea. Now, some may be thinking that was forever ago, but if you were a kid in the 90s like me and utilized millennial math, it really wasn't that long ago. But all jokes aside, in the mental health community, something being coined for the first time only 30 years ago means it's still relatively new. And in fact, we hear all the time that many people in this community have no idea what moral injury is or don't feel like they know that much about it. So some of you listening are like, yeah, that's me. Can you please just tell me what moral injury is? So here we go. When presented with a traumatic or unusually stressful circumstance, an individual may perpetrate, fail to prevent, or witness events that contradict deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. And when this happens, it can lead to a moral injury. So this could be acting in a way that goes against their beliefs or failing to do something in line with their belief system. It could also include simply witnessing behaviors that contradict their values and morals. And it could also be caused by experiencing a betrayal from leadership or others in positions of power or their peers. Moral injury is the distressing psychological, behavioral, social, and sometimes spiritual aftermath of exposure to such events. So as you can imagine, it's highly personal, and as a result, this episode is going to be a little different. Traditionally on the podcast, our guests are military and veteran spouses or family members. But for this topic, I thought it would be most appropriate to bring on someone who had actually themselves experienced a moral injury as a result of military service. So you also get to see a little bit more into my life and relationship today, as I am very excited to have my husband, Cody, join me today to discuss moral and spiritual injury. If you've been listening to us since episode 1, you know a little bit about my husband already, but Cody, I'd love to have you introduce yourself in your own words, sharing a bit about your military history and what you're doing now.
It's my first time on a podcast, so this is a new experience for me. So thank you for having me. So my name's Cody. I served active duty in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2010. I initially started out as an amphibious assault vehicle personnel, eventually stepped into a more infantry role overseas in 2 combat tours to Iraq, 2005 and 2006. So I got injured on my second deployment. I had initially intended on, serving 20 years and retiring, of course, but, things happen in funny ways. So only got to do 7 years in the Marines. After I got out, I was actually previously married at that time. I was diagnosed with PTSD pretty early on after separating from the Marines. I eventually moved back to Austin in 2012. Transferred my college credits over to University of Texas at Austin, where I met my beautiful wife during that time. But I was still dealing with a lot of my own personal issues during that time period. I was going to therapy off and on for, specifically PTSD and kind of, helping me navigate, that situation. I ended up becoming an engineer for several years, but essentially it was, very, very intellectual work, but it was not filling my cup, so to speak. So fast forward a little bit, 2020, I resigned as an engineer. Fast forward a little bit more, I ended up going to EMT school, where I am now a practicing EMT provider, currently going to paramedic school. It definitely has me more, feeling more fulfilled in my career and what I do on a day-to-day basis. And it's definitely had a huge impact on my, family life and home life. And I'd say the biggest thing probably about it that has affected me the most is, a level of camaraderie, essentially. I didn't find that a lot in a lot of places, after getting out of the Marine Corps until more recently, until, I started serving in the EMS field. The level of camaraderie we have, the level of, essentially, the quote unquote brotherhood that we all share in what we do in EMS, it's huge. And, it's definitely something that I missed from my Marine Corps experience that I feel like I finally have again. And now, fast forward a little bit more, happily married, have a little baby, 9-month-old little girl who is the joy of my life. And so that is my nutshell story.
And you guys should be real proud of him, not knowing him. Nutshells are hard for him. So that was he's done a lot more incredible stuff than that. Those were the bullets, the important bullets. And one of the reasons I also wanted him to mention what he's doing now is just like we talk about PTSD or TBI or other invisible wounds of war, they're more prevalent in this community because of the military service, but anyone can get all those things. And that's same with moral injury. And you can imagine how some of our other service fields, like EMS, fire, police, even, what we do as social workers, you could be at risk for moral injuries as well. So just a little reminder of it's unique to this position, to this community, but also not. So, Cody,
yes.
When did you first hear about and learn about this concept of moral injury? And when you learned about it, kind of what did you think about it?
So actually, I didn't actually hear the actual phrase moral injury until I actually heard it from you, just a few years ago during your line of work. You had just kind of brought it up in, passing conversation to me a couple of times as I was hearing you talk about, this or that, that you're doing, in your work. And, I kind of thought to myself, oh yeah, I think I know what that is, but I told myself, hey, that's something I'll look into that. I'll, research or investigate that a little bit more later. Of course, here we are later and learning more about it recently. I definitely realized that I had a very little understanding of what moral injury actually entails.
And now that you do.
Oh, I was, definitely, oh, hey, let me raise my hand here. That's me. All the light bulbs came on, of course, huge revelation.
And in him telling you he first heard about it from me, for all the spouses or loved ones listening, there was a reason I maybe brought that up to him. Maybe I saw some things that I thought sounded familiar, but I wanted to bring it up in a way that was gentle and not, we always encourage with our family members, we're not here to diagnose our service members or our veterans. We're here to support ourselves and support them. And so if this is a concept you haven't heard about, we hope that us talking through it as a couple, someone who's experienced themselves and someone who's loving the person who's experiencing it, can help you maybe see if this is something you think may be going on, for yourself or in your relationship, and maybe how to broach the subject with your loved one in a way that's not like, hey, I think you have this, but in a supportive way. So it's new to Cody, but so something kind of different we're going to do here too, since we know this is a topic maybe not everyone knows as much about, is as we go through the questions, I'm also going to put in some educational content, and then basically elicit Cody's kind of thoughts and feelings on that as well. And you'll hear some from me as well. So this is mainly Cody's show, but also coming through from that couple's perspective as well. So a lot of times when we talk about moral injury or spiritual injury, it's common that people hear those terminology, especially spiritual injury, and may go right to thinking belief system equals religion. And that does not necessarily have to be the case. It can be. So if you follow a certain faith or religion, moral injury can certainly impact that. But when we're talking about moral injury more broadly, that's not that we're speaking to broader belief systems. So Cody, when you kind of hear about what comes to mind for you when you're thinking about your own belief systems?
So, what comes to mind for me and my own belief system? I guess you would say I believe in right and wrong, that there is definitely, a way of treating people. There's a level of human decency involved in our day-to-day actions, with people. But definitely even more so in what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can kind of even like hearing that if you are someone who practices a religion, that's prevalent. Like that concept exists in religion as well, but it doesn't have to. So you don't have to have a religious faith to be impacted by this. And obviously your belief systems are very individualized, so they are what they are for you. And that's gonna dictate if, when, how you might have something that happens or that you do or don't do that creates that rift that can lead to a moral injury. So, in order for a moral injury to occur, an individual must feel like a transgression occurred and that they or someone else crossed a line with respect to their belief system, like we were just talking about. So, in so much as you feel comfortable sharing, did anything like this happen during your military service?
I guess to flat out answer your question, yes, I definitely saw a lot of things, I guess what you would say, by the hands of that I didn't think existed, or I guess, you would say that still happen today, like maybe like, oh yeah, that only happens in movies, or yeah, that happened in medieval times, kind of thing. Definitely, witness things with my own eyes that were, for lack of better words, very disturbing. Things that, I could sit here and say are, still, they were seared into my brain. Um, you know, atrocious things, evil acts, if you will, I guess. It's really hard to put into words, actually just how just awful, some of the things I saw were.
And I can imagine you're not alone in experiencing that, but also in that feeling of difficulty to even put it into words. And so as the spouse sitting here and hearing from other spouses where sometimes we just want to know, right? We just want to know what they're struggling with and don't understand why, they can't talk to us about it. That might be part of it, right? That might be part of what's going on is it's something that you can't even put words to necessarily, or that you wouldn't even want to. So just
exactly.
Yeah, so just something to think about from that spouse perspective is it's not necessarily personal if your veteran isn't wanting to share certain things with you. At least that's how I see it. So what you spoke to was definitely the witnessing the acts of others. Another piece of moral injury that many can struggle with comes as a result of those actions or inactions on their own part. And something I want to like caveat here before we go into more of this is for those listening, like what's incredibly important when holding space for someone else who may be sharing about their moral injury with you is that one, we can't understand their experience. We just can't, no matter who you're talking to, right? We can't understand another person's experience. And two, our moral code is not theirs. Again, that's why I felt it was so important to not like, as someone who I don't feel like I've experienced moral injury, to come and sit in here and talk to you guys about it because it is so individualized. So putting my own moral lens on Cody's experiences is not helpful. I believe different things than he does. We've had different experiences. I don't have those images going through my head. I can't know what I may have done or not done or anything in the situations he's been in. So as the person listening and holding that space, putting our lens over it or worse, passing judgment is unsupportive. It's unhelpful, especially when it comes to this. A lot of times they're probably already judging themselves. So I just wanted to kind of caveat that here. And then Cody, if you are comfortable speaking to kind of the other side of moral injury, where if there's anything you experienced while you were serving where you had thoughts, feelings about things you did or didn't do?
Well, I could say that, I most definitely faulted myself for a long time for things that I did or didn't do in country, in a combat environment. It actually took a lot of therapy to help me to understand that there were, you know, a lot of things outside of my control. It's probably more in reference to the things that I wish I could have, would have, should have done differently. Thinking that I did something bad is something I still try to reconcile to this day. But I realize that the phrase, situation dictates really comes into play for not blaming myself for a lot of things that were necessary at the time for both self-preservation and, to protect the Marine to my left and the Marine to my right.
Thank you for being willing to even share that much with us, because I know it is a vulnerable topic, and we appreciate you. I appreciate you. I know the listeners appreciate you for being here today and sharing with us. So I've heard a little bit of some of these feelings come through in what you're talking about, but kind of those hallmark reactions or feelings of moral injury that we see a lot are feelings of guilt or shame, disgust, or anger. So I wondered if there was anything specific that you wanted to touch on that may, from what you've shared so far, or maybe those feelings were coming out.
I definitely felt guilty. I blamed myself for a lot of things, and because I had felt I had done bad things, I felt I was a bad person because of the things I realized that I was actually capable of doing. Then shame more on the side of what I felt I was responsible for, and I'd say anger, disgust for what I saw others do and to see what others are actually capable of. I felt that what I found out I was capable of doing was nothing compared to what I saw others do. And coming from a Marine, that means that was really bad.
So got some of the light, dark Marine humor in there, of course. How could we not? Yeah, of course. So I'm curious. Those are big feelings to grapple with for anybody. So how did you feel like that impacted you?
When I came home from deployment, I was disgusted with people here at home. The things I saw when I was overseas made me disgusted with, the human race, just as a whole. But when I came home and saw how oblivious, people were, Americans were, to what was going on in the rest of the world, and didn't care or didn't want to know about what was going on in other parts of the world, the atrocious acts of violence going on in the rest of the world. I was, quite frankly, I was disgusted by people here at home. All they cared about was themselves, and they were inconsiderate about anyone and everything else. I internalized a lot. I rarely shared anything at all. I wore a mask of, that strong Marine who can handle anything. Exuded that badass mentality, oh yeah, hey, I did cool things, I saw cool things, I kicked a lot of ass. But essentially, I was closing myself off. I went through periods of time where, I'd be that social butterfly, but after maintaining that for so long, that would kind of crash, and I'd hit a dark time where, I just couldn't hold that mentality onto that mentality anymore. Your grip on those demons, it fatigues, and, they start to slip through your fingers. So I had to feel those feelings and, think the dark thoughts. I'd recluse and not leave the house for days at a time. I would drink by myself, not go to work, call out for days at a time. Definitely, some unhealthy and unproductive things going on. But I was in an unhealthy space, and I had to, in essence, let it play out until I felt like I could, put that mask back on again and face the world again.
Thank you for sharing that. So some of that talked a little bit about how you were kind of coping with some of those feelings, but anything else you want to say about how you were coping, whether it was healthy or unhealthy?
Definitely unhealthy. I would drink a lot, both, alone at home, with my dogs. And I'd also go out, drinking a lot. Going out and drinking, it felt fun. I could convince myself that, everything was good and great and everything was fine. And home alone drinking would, take me to that dark mentality. And so I'd keep drinking, hoping it would, take me out of it. But it had the exact opposite effect, and it would just, dive me deeper into it. I jumped from superficial relationship to superficial relationship, which, that just allowed me to stay on that surface level with someone, they get to know the fun going out version of me, but, never saw the other side of me, nor did I want them to know the other side of me because, I knew one, they wouldn't understand, and two, they probably wouldn't care anyway. I also, that didn't really let me get to know them either, but Fun Cody was a genuine side of me, but it was definitely just a tool that I would use to make it appear that that was, that was all of me. That was me. But, anything to keep it fun and light. And when it got dark, that meant it was time to, change things up, make that change. But obviously it was not a healthy one.
Mhm. And for those of you who are curious who I met, when I met Cody, I met Fun Cody. And when we were kind of prepping for this, and I was talking about Fun Cody, I was like, Fun Cody is a drug. Like, still to this day, he's a drug. He's just the absolute best. He's the person you want to be around. He's the person who makes you feel like you're the most special person in the room. And it is a genuine part of his personality. Like, Fun Cody still exists today. Just like I hope Fun Hannah exists somewhere here.
Absolutely.
But you did absolutely paint the picture. That was all of you. That was who you were. And then, I remember the first time, I think it was about 3 months into us knowing each other and dating each other when that switch flipped. And I imagine that's what you're saying when it was like, wasn't fun and light anymore, time to make a change.
Yes.
And yeah, I can tell you as the person who was impacted by that, not a fun change. And I think we'll get into that here in a bit. But I mean, you talked about relationships and how that kind of impacted your relationships. And obviously with our, group, most people who are listening to us are probably the spouse or the loved one of a veteran. So I'm curious, when you said, hey, it's not light and it's fun anymore, it's time to make a change. What did that change look like when it came to those intimate or friend or family, whatever, those relationships that you had at the time?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the type of relationship, I would in some form or fashion, self-sabotage those relationships, and do whatever I could to try to cut ties with, that person, what we call going dark, from a communication standpoint. I would just simply just cut myself off from people.
Yep. I remember that. That's the best. As the person on the other side, that's definitely a way to describe it. Like I said, Fun Cody was the best. So imagine being Fun Cody's girlfriend. It was like, I'm the most important person in the world. Like, this is it. This is this is the best person I could ever have in my life. And then to get that severe cut, that going dark, and really, you have no other information to kind of even understand why that would happen. And then it's so severe that, like, I truly could not comprehend, no matter how hard I tried, like what was happening and why, because that's how severe it was. It went from, whatever, 60 to 0 opposite. And I'm a recovering control freak because it's something I constantly work on. So not knowing why that happened was really, really hard for me. And, we honestly did this dance for a couple of years, kind of going between those phases of, okay, we're doing this, it's working. then that break, that going dark, and then trying to come back together, and then okay, this is working, and we did that dance for a couple years. So I'll go ahead and I'll toot my own horn. I obviously helped break the cycle. We're happily married, and we don't go through this cycle anymore, and haven't in many, many years. So you obviously didn't stay dark with me. So I'm curious what helped bring you out of that, and also because it wasn't like it was easy. So what was challenging about trying to kind of work through that with me, like break that cycle?
So with you, I guess what made you unique and special was that you didn't judge me. You were not a judging kind of person that, always came out that, I always appreciated that about you. I never felt judged by you. Whereas, people in the past, regardless of the type of relationship it was, friends, family, romantic relationships, as soon as I wasn't fun Cody anymore, they didn't want anything to do with me. And, but you were like the way I envision it in my head at that time is that you were this, this light that had broken through the clouds, that beam of light you see on a gloomy day, but just like one brightness of light coming from the sun, just like penetrated right through the clouds. That's exactly kind of what you were. You were that light shining through that dark, cloudy day.
I didn't bribe him to say that. Just so you know.
She did no, she did not. And I don't know if I see a little teary eye coming up right there or not, but it is what it is. That's how I would describe her. You were one of the first people that actually took a genuine interest, in my, military experience, in the Marines. You actually asked questions and showed genuine interest. And, in that experience, I mean, hell, even my ex-wife didn't take an interest, even at the time, she hated it, essentially. But I knew with you, I always just knew that, hey, this is someone different, So of course, I always told myself I'd be an idiot to not keep this person in my life. But yeah, I mean, no, you're right. It was like it was still hard because it was just really hard to trust people.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, I could only trust dogs.
Well, yeah, everyone should trust dogs. We don't know about you, those people who don't trust dogs. We don't know what's wrong with you. I'm kidding. But no, I'm really glad you brought up trust, because trust is like a real important concept when we're talking about moral injury. So you guys, listeners, know that Cody has PTSD. He shared that. And so I feel like when we're having a conversation about moral injury, it's important to discuss the difference between moral injury and PTSD. And so you can have both moral injury and PTSD, they can coexist together, but you can also just have a moral injury or just have PTSD. And so in both instances, PTSD as its own entity and moral injury as its own entity, there is a need that is not being met. And with PTSD, the need not being met is safety. So the traumatic event you experienced made you feel unsafe. You're struggling to get that safe feeling back again. You feel unsafe. And in the case of moral injury, the need not being met is trust. So as a result of the action, inaction, etc., that perpetrated the moral injury, you may not trust yourself as a result. You may not trust an institution. You may not trust others, etc. So you brought up trust, and this is spot on for this. So I'm curious how you saw that issue of trust show up in your life.
That's definitely a loaded question, but it's
multifaceted.
Definitely multifaceted. Trust showed up in a lot of different ways. I should say the lack thereof. It definitely showed up in a lot of different ways. Speaking about my military experience specifically, I definitely lost trust in the government. Not taking a political standpoint by any means on this, but just to kind of cover that basis, I just kind of lost, that level of trust was lost because, we never knew what we were doing or, why we were going to certain places. We don't want to get little tidbits of information. Whereas I just felt like it was always, out of context. We never had the full story of, what we were doing and why we were doing it. And, I lost trust in, as hard as this is for me to say, I lost trust in the Marine Corps, in my leadership specifically. They would tell you that, nobody wants to hear what you're struggling with, that you're no different than anybody else here, you're not special. Um, what you're feeling doesn't matter. So you would essentially, adopt that mentality. So when I got injured on my second deployment, I felt like they cared about was, hey, are you deployable? Can you deploy or not? And while I was going through my months and months of physical therapy, my command just flat out didn't want me anymore. They wanted to send me to a different unit. But I definitely felt like, nobody had my back anymore. Even after everything we went through, together, training overseas, just, all the shit we went through together, just because I got hurt, now they were treating me differently. So yeah, I felt betrayed by those I put all my faith and trust in, to support me and have my back. And then, suddenly they didn't. It's like, bye, Felicia, see ya. We don't want you anymore. But I lost trust in people because, you see people do bad things, as much as, you want to believe, or as much as I always, used to believe, people were inherently good. What I saw in my experience, violated that mode of thought, that I had, prior to the Marine Corps. It violated that belief system. So I didn't trust people. I couldn't trust people to have my back. I can only depend on myself, which was actually something I learned from a really, early age, earlier in life, just due to my childhood and upbringing. I had to be, very self-sufficient, from that very early age.
Mhm. And I think the more and more like we've talked about this and I've tried to understand some of this, it's this like loss of trust in people has helped me kind of have a lot more empathy and understanding for like some of, I guess I would say what I would think are like the more like superficial or whatever surface level things that kind of come up that I'm like, what the heck is going on? In those moments I'm like, what the heck? Why doesn't he see this the way that I see it? Or like, why isn't he giving that person the benefit of the doubt? Like, and this can, for y'all listening, this takes all sorts of things. It could be, someone we're interacting with, who's doing work on our house, or someone driving in the car next to us, or at the grocery store, right? And sometimes it's little things, and then I'll see myself getting frustrated with like your initial reaction, right? Of like that they, their intentions are bad, why are they behaving this way? And I'll get sometimes really, really frustrated because I am definitely the giving people the benefit of the doubt type of person. I lead with that. And now that we have, like, honestly, even just like having the conversations we had to figure out if we could even get to this place coming on the podcast and feeling comfortable talking about this, right?
Mhm.
We had lots of pre-combos. It helps me really understand that. And I hope that like in those moments where I find myself getting frustrated with, how you're talking to the person in the car next to you, I can have that moment of empathy and realize, well, yeah, we have different experiences that have led us. There's a reason I give people the benefit of the doubt, right? I've had X million experiences, upbringing that led me there. You did not, right? And you had others why that is sometimes your default. And I know that's something that you also consistently are trying to work at.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's hard, and that's what we're talking about.
It is.
It's hard to undo all that. And then so that was kind of, a little bit about like how this kind of shows up in our relationship for people around us, right? Interacting with people around us. But for, our partners and family members listening, who maybe are having that relationship, especially if it's an intimate partner relationship with an individual, struggling with moral injury, trust is huge in relationship. I mean, it's not huge, it's the thing, it's the main thing, right?
Absolutely.
Without trust, there is no meaningful relationship. And so if trust is missing in your relationship, and especially if you're that partner who doesn't have this understanding of what may be going on, what's causing that. I know for me, that was so hard. I was like, how the heck can I show you any better than I'm showing you that I'm here for you, that I'm not going anywhere, that you can trust me? And it was really hard. So, because I just didn't know, I a lot of times it was like trying to blame myself. Like, what have I done? Is there something I did wrong, to show him I wasn't, I'm not trustworthy. So it can be it can be a real spin out moment for the person on the other side trying to figure it out. So I'm curious, talking about trust in relationships specifically, how have you seen that play out, whether that's with me or others in your life?
Well, like with you, like even though I wanted to trust you, I wanted to share, those intimate details, those past experiences of not being able to trust people, are hard to break through.
Mhm.
It was a lot of hard work because building back trust from a lifetime of people, you know, letting me down, it's hard. Everyone I was supposed to be able to trust, violated that trust. I'd just been burned, just way too many times.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, and I hope people listening are having some of the moments I had too, where it's like, I mean, yeah, of course, duh. Like, how could it not be, right? Like, more often, most of us have probably had at least one experience in our lives where someone let us down in a big way. So, like, to imagine if that's happening over and over and over again, and not just like my friend, asked out that guy that she knew I liked, man. Like, and I've been there, right? And that hurts. And in the moment, everyone's experience is what it is. So that can hurt you to your core. But some of what we're talking about is on a whole another level that, while it is so individualized, a lot of us can't understand. And if it's happening over and over and over again, right? But, again, kind of weighing in on my perspective, I think one of the things Cody and I talked a lot about as we were prepping for this was like, I want to make sure we're like real and raw about some of the hard stuff. Like, I don't want it to come off that like, yeah, just do all this stuff like we did, and then it's easy. It's easy to do the hard stuff. No, it's not easy to do the hard stuff, and it's not easy on his end to put in that work, to like the work that he did to try and trust me. And it wasn't easy on my end to just keep showing up despite the fact that he couldn't trust me, right? And that the only thing I could do was just continue to show up and hope that at some point that would be enough for him to like change it. But what I want to say to spouses who may be in it, that's not easy to do. That's not easy to do, and everyone has their limits. Like, if you're in a one-way situation, like, it's okay if you can't continue that, right? It's okay if that's not enough for you. So please know that what we're saying we did is not what we're telling you need to do. It's what worked for us, and part of the reason that and there were times where I think honestly, the last time we did this dance, we both made the decision to not do it anymore. Like, honestly, we were just gonna kind of focus on ourselves. We were gonna be in each other's lives though, because we were important to one another. We knew that, but we weren't gonna try and be in a relationship. We were just gonna try and focus on ourselves. So we actually, in a sense, kind of did walk away, from trying, because it was too hard for both of us. And for us in that moment, that's what allowed us to actually figure it out. But it's hard. So just know that we're not coming from the point of, this is what you need to do if you're struggling with this. No, you need to do what's best for you. But this is us telling you what we did for us. So speaking to that moment of kind of when we stopped trying, something else, which is half chance, right? Half luck, not necessarily anything we did happened to you that helped us. So I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I will speak to that. So it was really kind of a defining moment for, several different reasons, but essentially that defining moment was, I'd say back in 2018, I had injured my calf pretty badly. And, I realized that, hey, I need help. I need help here. I cannot, do these things that most people on a day-to-day basis, you're self-reliant on doing just normal day-to-day tasks. And asking for help was not something I did. That was just maybe something superficially, hey, help me move this couch, hey, I need your help doing this real quick, 5-minute task or something. But asking for genuine help in the truest form, that was just not something I did. But you were the only person I felt that I could trust to ask that from, and you showed up. You didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. I felt like I didn't even need to like really explain, what I needed help with, just generally that, hey, I need your help, and yeah, you showed up.
No. Yep, and this is when we weren't dating.
Mhm.
This is when we weren't dating. But we cared about each other, and that we had stopped kind of fighting that at that point. And yeah, and for me in that moment it was easy to help you. At that point I don't think there was any agenda, at least on my end. From what that was, it was just, yeah, and I don't know that I understood just how difficult it was in the way that I understand now, since we've had conversations about it and time has passed, but I did know that's not an easy thing for him to do, to ask for help. And it also hit me how meaningful that was to me, that I was that person in your life that you were, willing to ask the hard thing of. And so, yeah. So that again, but that was chance that happened in that moment, sort of thing. So again, it's not just like, yeah, go make your veteran tear a muscle in their calf and then all things will be good. It just timing worked out for us in that way. And all the hard work we put in the years before that. I think we've naturally talked about some of this, but I think this is something, a spouse came to me and asked me for some help when they're in it, we touch base and they're really in it, and they're in that point of him, saying, I gotta go dark, I gotta do this stuff for me, and I'll loop you in when and if and I can, and it's like, what are you talking about? I'm your wife, like. And when we spoke, it really took me back to that first time where it was like, I can kind of, be a little vain and be like, I kind of thought I was like your world, dude. Like I thought we were like in it, even though it was still short period dating. Like we spent all our time together. Like we had such an amazing time together. And then to have that severe cut, no explanation. And I remember trying to get you to talk to me, and you were very vague and very like, I can't, I can't, like, I wasn't even getting answers, right? Like you weren't even able in the moment to give me answers. And so I really, when I was talking to the spouse, it took me back there. And I felt when we left the conversation, I felt so unhelpful. Like I wanted to be able to give her tangibles. And the truth is that's part of my, A type, wanting to give tools and things like that. And there aren't really, but I remember I came to you because I wanted more insight on, like, what was going through your head in the moment. What are things that helped? Like, what are things that I did that were helpful, even if it didn't necessarily feel like that to me in the moment? And maybe what are things that I did or someone else did that were really unhelpful? Like, what are those, if you're in it and you're, as the spouse, like not really understanding how to support your partner, what are some things that are hurtful versus what are helpful? And you gave some, I really liked a lot of what you said. So I'm going to ask you to share that again. Some of the things that were hurtful versus helpful.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. And, it's like I said, it's if my experience or, things that helped us can help anybody else, just makes me even feel better about sharing. So essentially things that you did that were helpful was you never did anything hurtful, so to speak. Whereas in my previous relationships, they did, do hurtful things, meaning, yes, they hurt me as both an individual person, but also did things that were hurtful to a relationship and me being able to trust that person. They were, judging of me and, essentially not validating me. Again, another thing I didn't learn about until Hannah over here about, validating, your partner and their feelings. But, not validating me in previous relationships, with, not caring about, this experience or that experience, or, that it was making me, how it was making me feel, the way I was feeling at the time. And of course, just walking away. as soon as I did try to, explain to them why I was feeling the way I was feeling about something, or just even the simple fact that, hey, this is how I feel right now. I haven't processed it yet about why, but this is how I feel. In a moment I would try to lean on that person for, support. They would just say, they just wouldn't be there. And I even had somebody say, and I quote, fuck you and fuck your PTSD, when we broke up. So in turn, helpful things that you did were showing up. And that can come in a lot of different ways, just that phrase of showing up. Just being there in person, simply conveying that, you're there for them. Even something as simple as a text message, I know would come across, in a very big way. It definitely did not go unnoticed. You let me know that it was okay to feel a certain way. It's okay to have feelings, that my feelings weren't wrong. Whereas before I had people tell me like, oh, what you're feeling is wrong. Like, or, oh my God, why are you feeling that way? Or get over it. Literally saying that to my face. I'm like, well, hey, that's not helping here. Um, that, you let me know it was okay to feel angry or ashamed or whatever it was I was feeling, in a reaction to something. You were the first person to teach me that it was okay to feel how you feel. And that, it's important to have a safe, no judgment space to share those feelings. This is actually something I think about a lot when thinking about, something we want to impart on our own daughter, making sure she understands, we're her safe space, and that, it's always okay to feel her feelings, and that, her feelings are valid. Acknowledging was validating for me, and allowing me time to have those feelings. You'd always ask me, what do you need? What can I do? And there wasn't always something to do, but I always took that as you wanting to help me through this. And those processing times, just over time just got shorter and shorter.
Yes, they did. Thank you. I mean, I hope that's helpful. But I guess where I'll kind of come up on the back and advocate for the spouse is, those are also helpful things to know, but they're not necessarily easy to do. And as the spouse, like, you have to be in a good place to be able to be there for your partner in that way, because it's not easy. And so, as you're hearing from Cody, a lot of, you taught me this, you taught me that. Yeah, I did. I happened to go to have a master's in social work that I was in the process of getting when I met Cody. And I'm not going to pretend that the work I do today doesn't, massively positively impact our relationship. That I have my own community that I tap into for my support. And even, previous to meeting Cody, I did and do my own therapy, so that I have the same safe, no judgment space. We are that safe space for each other, but it's also nice to have those other spaces based on what you think you need, whether you're, the veteran listening to this, a service member, or the spouse or the family member, if that's therapy, if that's counseling, if that's peer support, having those spaces where you can do the work for yourself to make sure you're even in a place to do the work for your relationship. It's really important. So just adding that in. And I'm kind of jumping into our next question, which is that, we've talked a lot about what this is, how it shows up, at least how it showed up for Cody in his life and relationships. But that may be leading a lot of people to ask, kind of like, okay, so what do you do about it? Like, how do you, if this is what's going on? We talked about how he's done some individual work and how we've done work as a couple, but if you're struggling with this, or your loved one is, like, how do you work through it? And so I think what's unique, important to mention here is that, when you hear the terminology treatment, we're really talking about medical or clinical conditions, and moral injury isn't that. Moral injury impacts the whole person, and because of its complexity, there are many ways it can be processed. And a lot of research is still being done in a lot of different research communities to really understand more how moral injury impacts individuals and how to work through it. So, like, for those of a faith community, it may be through various faith rituals and practices, or working with a spiritual leader. For others, it may be peer support. And again, just like anything, but especially with this, is very individualized. But it really, the thing to focus on is it's focused on accepting what happened and processing the emotions involved. So you talked a little bit, Cody. Is there anything else you want to say about thoughts you have on how you've been able to work through some of this, or how you may still be working on through it?
I'd say the biggest thing I could say is that, I did not get to where I am today alone. It always felt weird asking for help. I always felt silly for going to counseling almost every single time. It would always, feel uncomfortable, for, the first few minutes at least, but when I asked for help, I was given help. Help is there, all I had to do was ask for it, and it's okay to need help. It's okay to ask for help. There's, a ton of individual work to do, which is probably the hardest part, but it definitely helps to not go it alone.
Perfectly said. I'll say it. Perfectly said. So I kind of feel like that's just good advice for like anything we're talking about ever. But I do always like to have our guests leave our listeners with one piece of advice or wisdom that they would leave us with. So whether that's fellow veterans listening or their loved ones, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'd have to say that, something I try to tell myself every day or at the end of every day, no matter how the day went, just try to do something, a sliver of something better than you did the last.
And that can be anything, right? I love that. And that's a good advice for all of us, no matter what we're going through, right? So, sweetheart, I'm so grateful for you. This is something, again, as I told you guys at the beginning of this, like it didn't feel appropriate for this particular topic for like me to come on and talk about my husband's moral injury or to have someone else do the same. I really wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were, because it is something that's, even as Cody, shared with you guys, it's kind of even hard to describe, period, as the one who experienced it. So I didn't want to add another, whatever degree of separation from, trying to talk in a meaningful way about this topic. So I'm really grateful for you. And again, guys listening, this is his first time doing something like this, and something he always says to me is, I think he said it while we were talking too, is that if my experience or if our experience could help anybody in any way, he's willing to put himself out there. So, we do peer support, so I know the value of that, obviously, but it's very meaningful that you were willing to come out and share, like actually share, not just allow me to share from your perspective. So thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'm excited for people to hear what you had to say.
Well, I love you too. And thank you for letting me share a little bit of my story and talking to everybody.
Well, thank you guys. And we will catch you next month.
Thanks again for joining us on the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. We thank you for listening today and hope today's session left you feeling a little more connected or gave you some insight into the experiences of our military and veteran families. Don't forget to check us out at veteranspousenetwork.org to learn more about how our military and veteran families can receive the support they deserve.